Hello and welcome to our review of a small indie movie that came out today.
That joke is so overdone.
Fuck. Well, you know, I'm all about originality. So today we're talking about Avengers Infinity War. I am Zach.
I'm Dan.
And I'm Nick.
Alright, so we're going to begin this review kind of talking about what Avengers Infinity War means in the context of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, because this is a culmination of 10 years of films that has finally had what would be the beginning of what would be maybe the end of the Marvel Cinematic Universe?
Yeah, I think from most people's perspective, this is the end of one chapter, and then there'll be a whole nother series of phases with presumably a whole nother series of heroes. And obviously some of them have already been introduced. Black Panther was a big hit. Spider-Man was a big hit. And within the next year, there's going to be another Ant-Man movie and a Captain Marvel movie. So there are new people being brought into the forefront as well. But yeah, it's a good setup for a complete change.
Yeah. It's definitely a transitionary film, and I liked, like, even at the beginning when you had the Marvel Studios logo come up, they changed it to the 10, which is like, oh, yeah. That's like, that is a big deal. The fact that they began this 10 years ago with the first Iron Man film, thinking, all right, well, let's see what we can do with these, comic book movies, and doing it right. Oh, well, aside from Spider-Man 2, of course, which is the...
Spider-Man 2 is the pinnacle. But, we'll get into that at some other point. Despite us thinking that Spider-Man 2 is the pinnacle, just quickly, I just want to go into what reviewers have to say about this. Currently, this is one of the highest rated movies ever on IMDb, which I'm sure will go down, because the movie's only been out for 2 days, with a 9.1 rating. And has a 68% on Metacritic, an 84% critic score on Rotten Tomatoes, and a 93% audience score on Rotten Tomatoes. Now, not to brag, but I did make a spreadsheet leading up to this, and these numbers do very much correlate to my predictions. But that's the end of what I'm going to brag about. And yeah, just brief plot synopsis according to IMDb. The Avengers and their allies must be willing to sacrifice all in an attempt to defeat the powerful Thanos before his blitz of devastation and ruin puts an end to the universe. To the IMDb editors, commas, because that was one big run-on sentence. But anyway...
Not bad.
Yeah.
And I think the score now is obviously probably reflecting the huge hype that has surrounded this film. And I think, it's the second day that this movie's been out, because we just saw it on Friday, and it came out last night. And I think one of the biggest things about this is definitely the theater experience, because this is a huge film that a lot of people are, as you said, as you experienced, was people were being busted to see this film.
I saw it yesterday night, and there were 2 school buses in front of my movie theater. My own college was selling discounted tickets and was having a field trip to it. I'm not sure if that was last night or tonight. And I saw a 10:15 showing, which was sold out. The 10:10 was sold out, and all previous showings were also sold out. And they had people lined up behind dividers, and everything was set up mathematically so that way everyone could have the best experience that they possibly could. But they were expecting these numbers, and I'm sure by the end of the weekend, the box office will also show that off.
Oh, most definitely.
So,
because even now you're saying that, like, the box office is already estimated to be, like, close to, like, $100 million, you said?
Yep.
After what would be, at this point, a night, and including, like, the day as well, because we saw it at 8 o'clock in the evening on Friday, and if it's already at $100 million, this is gonna be a big ticket selling kind of movie.
Who would have thought?
I know, honestly, but I think that's kind of what this goes into, is the fact that this movie is doing so well is because you have characters that people really want to see finally after 10 years coming together in what will be an epic adventure, which they don't need to invest any time in this movie to character development anymore. It is full on, this is the story of these people coming together to basically answer the threat that is Thanos, which is absolutely incredible for a film.
Yeah. And just quickly, before we get too much into the actual plot, spoilers, anything like that, just our general overviews of the movie.
Yeah, definitely.
Zach, did you like it?
At this point, I definitely did really enjoy it. I think I really did enjoy it, but it's not I wouldn't say it's the best film ever kind of thing, but I really, really liked it, I would say. Okay.
Dan?
After seeing all these films throughout my younger years into, like, my adulthood, I think this was a perfect melding of all of them in a good part 1 movie where we have this melding of like pop culture, like ethics, humanitarianism, just like very interesting themes throughout, and it paid off in a great like Thanos film with good setup for the next Infinity Wars. So that was good.
I think those are three words that describe this movie perfectly. Do I think it's the best Marvel movie? No, but it certainly is pretty high up there in my perspective. So I think at this point we should just go into a little bit spoilers and then just talk about probably first the things we didn't like.
Yeah. So from here on out, we're going full spoilers.
All right. So. Okay, so at this point we're going to go into the spoiler section and just starting off with some of the negatives that we had with the film. I'd say let's just start with Zach, go our way across the couch.
Okay. I mean, I'll start with probably the easiest one to talk about that kind of took me out of the movie a little bit. Not really. I guess that's not the right thing to say, but this is a story of a lot of different characters coming together, so they have to handle it in a very complicated way where they're going to be talking about literally connecting these characters across an entire universe. So they have probably three main storylines that they need to interweave with each other. The way they do that is by kind of cutting away and space hopping, as we kind of talked about, and it feels disjointed, but in that I also can't say I don't know how they would have done it better. So as I was saying, it kind of comes down to the fact that it is disjointed. As they're hopping from place to place, you kind of lose out on a little bit of the momentum from the previous scene.
Given that this is a two-part film, I see why you're saying that, but given that it's a two-part film, I think that like as you just said, that is kind of how their hands were forced in this sense, and they had to make the film in this way where you're right, there were very separate storylines that felt a little bit apart from each other throughout it, but in the end they did eventually meld together, which I think worked out. Other negatives, it was really hard for me to kind of go into this movie and like look out for those negative things as a critic, just because of through the buildup of all these films coming out prior to this. One of the things I had a nitpick at, and I don't know, this is really the only thing I could think of, and it's really nothing, but there was just one special effect shot that I was like, you're gonna put so much effort into having all these amazing effects, and then you're gonna slack off in one area a little bit. And
what was that scene?
The one shot, it was when I think it was when everyone was fading away in the end, where Thanos was taking over, and just people were kind of fading off from reality. The other doctor, Hulk. Bruce Banner. Sorry, Bruce Banner was in the Iron Man suit, the Hulkbuster suit, and it just looked super faded. And I realized that, like, sure, all those guys in the background were out of focus slightly, which I get, but in a movie where he takes up a decent portion of the picture in this shot, when you dump so much time and effort into special effects, like, just make it look good.
I can agree with that, because it's just kind of like weird floating head thing in the middle of that, and that's a complaint that I have, is also a little bit the special effects, but I do realize you have to cut the budget somewhere. Yeah. There's a couple scenes that throughout I was like, well, that doesn't look that good, but I guess it's not that important. Probably my biggest special effects complaint would be the Doctor Strange one near the end, where he becomes Vishnu for a minute and then splits into multiple Doctor Stranges. I just thought it looked a little bit crappy, but all in all, that one's not too bad.
I wasn't expecting that one, so like it took me caught me off guard, so I did kind of enjoy it a little bit. But I get what you're saying with the arms, where it was a little,
I think
like,
it might have just been like seeing it the second time. I just more had a chance to notice it. Other than that, I something that I call the Rogue One effect, where in the beginning of Rogue One, you're shown planet, and then probably 40 minutes from the end, you finally get to the final battle, and that part's so good that everyone just goes, oh, this is a great movie, but you kind of ignore like the just disjointedness of the rest of it, and that's kind of how I feel about this movie, except unlike Rogue One, I cared about every single character, because obviously I've had 18 movies that build up to it. So that one's kind of a complaint with structure. I don't think you can really enjoy this movie unless you've seen all the others, because there's so much character development that is missing. Because Bucky specifically says 5-6 words. He's like, "Oh, it's good to be with you again at the end of the world."
Yeah.
He said, "Gun's not for sale," and then he says Steve at the end when he's fading away.
Yeah.
He's on screen for maybe 5 minutes.
I mean, I understand what. I think if you're gonna say that though, you have to be very careful, because what you said is you're not gonna enjoy this film in its entirety. Like its fullest possibility.
It looks fun,
yes.
but then you get something like a Kong Skull Island, where there's a lot of great visuals, but the characters themselves are not the best.
Yeah.
Or like a Pacific Rim, where you get great monster fights, you get all this, but everyone's kind of one-dimensional.
And it's tough too when you have these big roles, these big role actors playing these massive parts, surrounded by sub primary role characters and actors that play also a very significant part, but it's not like a lead part, so their time in this movie was kept, like you said, 5 minutes.
Yeah.
But I also, again, I think we're getting this movie. You're right.
No, I'm not saying that's a problem. I'm saying it's the way they had to do it.
We have to come up with negatives, because all in all, I think it's a great movie.
That's true.
That's one thing. And at the same time, where I feel like some characters are specifically underdeveloped, there are also some character changes that I don't think flow that well, whereas I'm completely fine with every time there was like a scene of intensity, Tony Stark would make a joke, or Star-Lord would make a joke, and that fits into the character. I wasn't a huge fan of Bruce Banner constantly making jokes, because in the first 2 Avengers movies, he's the one who's most tormented by this curse of being the Hulk and like that. And even in Ragnarok, his whole thing is like, "You don't really like me, you just like the Hulk," and he's kind of kvetching. And that's even funnier, that he's still playing the straight guy in all of this. And the fact that he just is kind of throwing out jokes left and right, I don't know if that necessarily fits. Black Widow a little bit to that extent, because she makes one joke, but yet again, Black Widow, maybe 5 lines in the whole movie. I mean,
people though, like they like a character that changes, and I think like I know you probably have more insight about the Bruce Banner character specifically. It may seem out of his character a little bit. Again, like people like character that changes, and I think that even going back to the comedic moments that kind of relieve some of the pressure in the film were done really perfectly. It wasn't like overdone at all in some of like the other Marvel films, where I do personally feel it relied too much on the dialogue, which I get is important when you want to establish these characters and make them deeper, whereas in this film you don't need to do that because it's already been done. So
and it's only a weakness if you see this as a separate entity, but it's almost impossible to do that, because sure. At this point you're stuck with everything that you know and love from all these characters. But anything else that really stuck out or bothered anyone?
I mean, I guess not, but I also don't like.
It's not perfect.
It's not perfect, but that's what's hard. Is like there's not. I don't know. The weight. I think maybe it's like the weight of the film. It's like the weight of the film comes at the end. I feel like everything else, like all the battles and all this stuff. I mean, they have consequence essentially, but there's never an emotional punch until the very end. Yeah. Even though they try to do it the entire time. The entire movie is a threat of like, you're gonna lose a loved one, and then it never happens until the final scene where everyone's fading away and half the population has been exterminated.
Well, I can't tell, because I'm just happy it didn't feel like Last Jedi, where it was like you can't take anything serious for a second. There has to be a joke, like even in like the big climax of the movie. And this one at least subdued it near the end when things were very serious. But it's in these characters' nature to deal with traumatic experiences and make a joke about it. But I do agree, I wish it had more time, which is a weird thing to say about a movie that's 2 hours and 40 minutes long. Yeah. But yeah, if everything had that extra breathing room, it would be better. But I understand it would be a 4-hour movie if every single thing had that breath.
That time for you to process.
Yeah, and that's why I feel like probably the best moment in the movie is they're on the Titan planet, and Tony Stark cannot even fathom what Star-Lord has just said, and just sits there staring at the camera in silence for about 5 seconds.
Yeah.
And that's just great.
Yeah.
Because it gives you that breath, it gives you that room to breathe for the first time in almost any Marvel movie.
That's true.
So that was good. But we're not talking about positives
No,
yet. But,
Well, yeah, I mean, I was gonna say, as we begin to start talking about positives, and
I don't want to talk about positives yet.
All right, yeah,
Because I want to
yeah.
go one more thing.
yes, let's begin there.
We began with the stitching thing, and the question that I want to pose for this is because I just saw that as a major flaw. Now, looking at the best film trilogy of all time, Lord of the Rings.
Planet of the Apes.
Damn it. All right, Lord of the Rings, same idea, where they had to take multiple stories and they had to basically go out, have 3 separate stories, and then, Peter Jackson went through and actually filmed, put those stories together and figured out where to cut those along the way.
Yeah.
Now, I also understand that maybe the strength of that was because he was also putting in the character development that made those cutaways feel more meaningful. But it's also how those stories also had the same impact as well. In my opinion, I am very heavily biased, but why can he do that?
There's no one out there who's really like, well, those Lord of the Rings movies are all they're chalked up to be. But I feel like a good portion of that is, I remember when watching the special features in the extended editions of Lord of the Rings, there's a specific point where he's talking about he wasn't sure how the Battle of Helm's Deep would work, because it would just end up being 45 minutes of battle. And that's when he decided the thing that needs to happen is every once in a while you need to cut back to Merry and Pippin dealing with the Ents.
Yeah.
Because if you just have 45 minutes of battle, people will get fatigued and become uninterested. But it's the character moments in between that keep it even more gripping. Because you're cutting back to these people dealing with the aftermath of the battle that's going on, and then you cut back to the battle, and it builds up tension, and it makes... But it's the character moments in between that keep it even more gripping. Because you're cutting back to these people dealing with the aftermath of the battle that's going on, and then you cut back to the battle, and it builds up tension, and it makes you wonder, instead of, okay, there's this battle, obviously they're probably going to win, we'll see what happens, I guess we'll watch it through, you keep cutting back, and you wonder, well, how are they going to solve it, and then how is it going to get solved on the forefront?
Yeah.
And that's something I feel like this movie probably could have used, is a couple of moments where during the battle, you cut back to a moment of introspection, or characters actually dealing with a problem. But it just kind of seemed like while the Battle of Wakanda was happening, Thor was also fighting against a sun to keep a door open, and also Thanos was fighting against the other Avengers who were off on Titan. And there was no break specifically for character moments because the whole thing was action driven.
And I think maybe that's another like weakness of the film. Again, we're already in major spoiler territory here, but the necessary part of this film is at the very end you have a lot of major characters dying.
Yeah.
And I think maybe if you're going to have those heavy emotional moments, and you already know in Dark's mind we're already going to lose this many characters, you could take the time to lose a couple, and I guess they did that with Vision technically, but again, they could have taken the time, like you said, maybe you said this in the car on the way home, but like Tony Stark, if he had died at that scene, that would have been a more emotional impact to have a main character like Tony Stark die, not from a snap of a finger, literally, but from like an actual wound where he's coming to terms with his death. And
he put nanobots in his chest. He's invincible. He's super glue.
But I mean, like again, Aragorn seeing the leader of the elves being shot down, and everything goes slow motion. You see the actual like the horror of war that is just formed, and everything goes slow. The music fades out, and you feel that emotional impact of the battle. Whereas this film, that doesn't ever really happen until the very end. Yeah. And again, the also difference here is Gandalf comes. There is no Gandalf in.
Well, kind of Thor shows up in
Thor,
there.
But
I don't know. Well, that's
the same.
Well, I'm sorry to say it, Zach. This movie is not Lord of the Rings.
All right.
No matter how hard we try. But yeah, I understand what you're saying. I feel like a couple of strengths could have been there, had they focused on character moments in between, and had they had that feeling of loss or gravity brought in a little bit earlier. Because it is a big gut punch when the movie ends, but at the same time, it's like, well, I had fun for 2 hours and 20 minutes, and then I had 20 minutes of sad. And that seems to be the general consensus, where, like, everyone's... You go from laughing the entire way to, like, last night, people behind me were crying.
Yeah.
Because this is so important to them.
And that makes you want to push into the good aspects of the film, because this was a Thanos film, and I really liked that about it, where it was it was all that action and then sadness. It's like, okay, we're getting serious. They had to do that to have the part 1 and a part 2 where it was problem solution.
Yeah. So, yeah, I think at this point, we will now gravitate towards the more positive aspects of the movie.
Express how good this film and how, like, riveting it was to me. I had a very large Coke waiting in line, and literally, like, 20 minutes in, I was like, yep, I have to use the bathroom. But I stayed for the next 2 hours and 20 minutes because it was good enough where it was like, it was worth it to suffer through that uncomfortability and pain to the moment, like, once the film ended, I ran out of there. It's like, I did it, I survived it, and it was worth it because it was so good. And even though I complained about it doing a little piecemeal with those cutaways, it did keep me interested enough where it's like I was distracted from the fact that I really had to use the bathroom. And that's a good film. That's when you know it's good.
Yeah.
And I think that totally ties into, like, I remember I looked over at you, Nick, right before it started. I said, Nick, I have a question for you because I know you're going to have the answer. I said, how long is this movie? You said 2 hours and 40 something minutes.
Yeah.
And sitting there through this movie flew by for me.
Yeah.
It flew by because they didn't have these moments where, I don't know, it flew by for me completely.
Yeah. I mean, part of that can probably be attributed to the fact that there's no slow character moments.
Yep.
Yeah.
But at the same time, still kind of want them. But no matter what, everything still worked. And it's amazing that this movie is not a mess. Because, you have Space Raccoon and Man meeting together with Big Green Guy, going to Earth, and then dealing with... And obviously, like, there are parts in Civil War that are really dark and really deep.
Mm-hmm.
Same thing with Black Panther. And then the Guardians of the Galaxy show up, and somehow it does not feel like a total tone shift.
Yeah.
And that is just amazing in of itself.
It was a tone shift, but of, I think, just the right amount.
Yeah.
I think.
It didn't feel like, here's this comedy showing up in the middle of a serious moment. It was like, oh, now finally the people who are in the comedy can show what their worth is, and they can have this strong moment.
Yeah, and I think a lot of that is probably attested to the fact that we have had, I feel like Thor Ragnarok is what changed Thor from, like, he was funny in the first film, but he came out as a more comic character.
Yeah.
And even Bruce Banner as well in the Thor Ragnarok, like, that was a good way to say, okay, now that we know that these films are going to come together, we can have these threads essentially be established here, so that when these people do get together, those comedy levity moments that generally happen with the Guardians, because it is so, that's what they thrive off of, we can mesh this into a more serious film as well. And that just comes down to good planning, I think. And that's, if there's anything that this film shows, it's the fact that you can have 10 years of one essentially continuous story with all these different characters, and as long as you have the intention, as long as you have these intentional phases of a film, you are destined for success. Like, this is proof of that. But
you're almost even saying, like, or what I would say is, like, it's not just like character development for that sole character, it's character development for each character so they can have those moments where they connect on a level that we relate to as an audience. And
you already come into this film after seeing all these things knowing that that's what's going to happen in this film. You don't have to be pandered to. It's like, oh, hey, I know.
I know
it's
this.
Literally just saying, hey, what's up? What's up? Okay, we're fighting together now.
Yeah.
All right, good.
And that's why this movie is so much better than Justice League. And on this couch, did anyone else see Justice League?
No.
I did, yeah. I saw it while I was in Florida.
Okay. It's not bad.
But
it's not I think they almost depend on you being like, oh yeah, here comes Batman. But at the same time, you're like, in the last movie, Batman was kind of a dick. Who's this guy? And then with Superman coming back, it's the same thing. The only person you come in with good graces with is Wonder Woman.
Mm-hmm.
And Justice League, I watched them in a double feature at Regal Cinemas. And it was, Wonder Woman straight into Justice League, and just even seeing the coloration differences between Themyscira and Wonder Woman and then into Justice League, it felt like two completely separate visions. And it's amazing that the Russo brothers, who directed Infinity War, came in and still somehow they got the color scheme right from Guardians, from Thor, from all these galactic movies, and brought that into the same color scheme that Wakanda had set up, the same New York that was in the Avengers and the Spider-Man Homecoming. And it's just...
That's deep, that's
it
really
is amazing
good
to see that, it obviously there's dialogue tone shifts, there's musical shifts, but everything still flows together. And like, the first time I saw it, I was like, well, this is more like a collection of very good scenes with characters I like, and then it finally comes to this good amalgamation in the end. That doesn't mean they feel like separate movies. Like, it doesn't feel like there's the Guardians movie in the Avengers movie. It feels like there's the Guardians characters that are moving slowly away and gradually from their galactic presence into this more smaller scale thing. And that's why it works so well.
And I would even say, like, from an artistic standpoint, that is something that is hard to do. Like, given the amount of films and the amount of characters, to have the kind of emotions match the different character levels throughout all these films, to have them all kind of on the same wavelength.
Yeah, and that's going back to Justice League one more time. I promise I'll stop after this. And that's, you can very much tell in Justice League which parts were the Zack Snyder shots and which ones were the Joss Whedon reshoots. Aside from the mustache CGI, you can tell just by the way the characters are acting and being told to do something. Because you see a pissed off Superman, then a smiling one 2 seconds later, and you're like, oh, okay, well, that's very clearly the Joss Whedon thing. Like, the scene was supposed to cut at this point, but we need the happy guy because that's what this new director wants. Yeah. And this is the whole thing here is just understanding a vision. Yep. And that is exactly what went into this.
Yes. And
it's admirable, and it's phenomenal that it worked so well.
Yeah. And I think that maybe that's what we have to come back to, is the fact that this is a realized vision as well.
Yeah. And I think what I really enjoy about this film too is, like, we have all this immediate payoff with all these freaking cool characters throughout all these years, and even still in all this, it was a Thanos film. This was a film about Thanos, which was awesome, and they expanded him at just the right pace throughout the film. They showed, like, his evilness, like killing Loki, like, immediately, like, that hit freaking hard.
They set the tone instantly.
And exactly, and then I know I'm jumping really far ahead here now, but for him to give up someone he loved and kind of not knowing if he really loved Gamora or not, and having it so that he did, like, that just gives so much more character depth in that moment, and I can say, like, that makes Thanos at least likable as a villain.
Yeah, it's amazing that they went from the guy who smiles at the end of the first Avengers to the guy who just says, I'll do it myself at the second Avengers, and he grabs a glove, and then in Guardians he's just kind of the menacing guy in the chair. And even, like, the first trailers, I was like, alright, well, I know he's the big bad, but he just kind of looks like a big purple doofus. But they did such a good job making you care about him just in the first instant. And this is a similar thing from Black Panther. He has the right idea, but the wrong methods of doing it. Yeah. Like, he's trying to make this perfect universe where no one has to live in hunger, no one has to be impoverished, no one has to live the life that they shouldn't have to live, they shouldn't have to starve. And it makes sense. He's a lunatic for deciding that the only way to fix that is to get rid of just half. But he's fair. He kills everyone randomly. It's.
And I'm realizing now as we're talking about this, like, we talked about how there's a lack of character development because we're seeing it from the side of the heroes. But you're right. Like, every meaningful character development was focused on Thanos. Yeah. Which was good because, like, you're right. We always know he was a looming threat. Yeah. And now, like, I going in, I don't know the comics very well or anything like that, but seeing his intention and just his screen presence as well. It's like I knew everything that he was about within those first few moments, and then even when he was explaining like why, I was like, this guy, he makes sense.
Yeah,
and it's the same thing with Killmonger, where it's like, but hold on, you need to step back and take that,
He's not.
There's a perfect slope of, oh, well, that makes sense. That makes a lot of sense. That makes a lot of sense. Drop off, and then that's where it completely ends.
And it's not like he's just like a character, for the sake of being evil, where he's just like, I'm big and bad, like haha. Like no, it goes so much deeper than that. And I think of the villain in Rogue One, or not Rogue One. Yeah, Rogue One. I forget his name, and I know you guys are gonna hate me for it.
Krennic.
Yeah, Krennic. Like, it doesn't even compare. There's just so much more weight in a character.
You're saying Krennic should have gotten the credit for building the Death Star and not Tarkin?
You mean CGI face?
Oh, that's not true. I think that's one thing. It's like, it's still... I was wondering about the same kind of like ethical question here, and a lot of those ethical questions were brought up every single time there was an emotional moment with one character connecting to another. It was literally, if you kill me without hesitation, all of our problems will be solved.
Yeah.
If I mean, obviously, once he had the Reality Stone with Gamora and Quill, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Once he had done that, like, if he had just killed her and actually done it and not been bubble-ified, then like
too many bubbles.
No Soul Stone. If Scarlet Witch had killed Vision much earlier, it would have been fine. Literally, a lot of the failures of the Avengers is their fact that they don't believe in the principle of utility, where you kill one person to save many.
Cap even has the line, "We don't trade lives."
Yeah,
and that's it.
It's the whole ethics thing that I said before. It's like if you have the chance to save a life in a moment, you choose to do that. So it's tough when it gets down to it, where it's like, if you kill Vision right here, like, we might not have any more problems, but it's
and I think, but that's maybe, and again, this is not like, I mean, there will be people that do the philosophy of Avengers Infinity War, like, looking for you, wisecrack, but like, it'll be there, but there is a level there where it's like, and this is what was kind of brought up in like Civil War, and what the whole stance that Captain America has and what Tony Stark has is like, there's a point where once you have separated yourself from the populace, you are the Avengers, you are the defenders of Earth, like, your life has like more value. You're saying that you have more value, but it also devalues you as a human being, essentially. Like, as you elevate to be a guardian, your
give
humanity is stripped. Because you have to be willing to
then
lay
have
down
the
your
right
life.
to give your life.
Yes, and that's the thing. And Gamora, I think most Gamora and Vision, eventually Vision, they came to that realization, but it was like that human flaw of like, and sorry, this is not a human flaw, but the fact that, I care too much about you. Like, if you're in that position and a person in power, like, again, thank God we're just chilling, talking about a movie, but like, and this will never happen, but like, a person, like, once you make a decision to have power over somebody else or a large group of people, you have to have that conscious ability to let go of what it means to, like, to die for your own legacy. Like, your legacy is no longer you, it's the people you protect. So Vision should have died sooner, Gamora should have died sooner.
And I think that goes back to the wishing that Tony Stark had died, because the very last thing that Thanos says is like, half of the world will be destroyed, I hope they remember you. And it's important, the sacrifices that you make as opposed to who you necessarily are. And that's another overarching theme. And that's the thing. Even with the lack of character moments, there are a lot of huge themes that are still done basically through action as opposed to speech. And like, that's another thing to very much respect about this movie.
And if we're going, I'm going to kind of continue on this path, because I think one thing that the Marvel movies have really done, and you kind of touched on this a little bit, Iron Man was 2008, right?
Yep.
That's so. In the formative years of us, millennials, essentially, like, these are very much our formative mythology kind of thing. And if you trace back like what mythology really is, like these are the same, and it's like one of the best things ever. It's like it's the same story being told again, but this is like Greek mythology. Yeah. It's again where it's like these are things that people have been dealing with since the beginning of time, and the fact that it's being represented in a 200. Oh, this is probably like a 500. How much was this movie cost? Whatever, it doesn't matter.
For both movies, I think it was basically $1 billion budget.
Okay, so $1 billion.
At least that was the speculation like 6 months ago. I don't know the final numbers, but
and I honestly wouldn't be surprised. Yeah, and they will make it back, and I'm not surprised by that because honestly, but it's funny that these huge concepts, because it's such a similar story, because it's about heroes and what it means to be a hero, and our villain's really bad if you take it from if you give them the chance to look in their perspective. They're not the villain in their story. They're trying to save the world in the same way that the Avengers are. They just have differing methodologies about such things. Yeah. And I love the fact that if you take the time to really break these things down, you can use this incredibly visually stunning, entertaining movie to ask these ethical questions. And like these are the ways that we as like us stupid millennials can deal with
it.
They
want you to think.
Ridiculous.
Yeah, they want you to think about it for sure. And I think it also goes to show that a lot of these comic book type movies, the original, like the first cometh Iron Man films and the Thor films, like we saw these when we were younger, and now we're seeing this payoff as we are getting older. I think it also says that the filmmakers know that there is a generational gap where you can clearly say, there's a generation here, there's a generation here. This happens to be like our tellings of these mythical stories that go back, and I guess I'm like thankful for them. Like I'm thankful we have this.
Yeah, because we were there to view a part of history. Because if you think about it, this is the longest running like continuous franchise. Like obviously there are a lot of James Bond movies, but they're not related to each other completely.
There are also a lot of Mission Impossible.
There are a lot of Mission Impossible movies. Keep Mission Impossible 6, July 27th, I think. But yeah, and it's amazing to see. Like, yeah, I remember seeing Iron Man and thinking that was a good movie, and then I was like, oh, they threw in the little shield thing. That's fun, and just seeing it gradually build from there to literally be a part of culture, where this is obviously it's a cultural phenomenon. Otherwise, people would not be showing up to this in droves. But this is one of the most important movies to date, and that's I don't think that's in
series kind of to date. Like
I think just this in general, it's
just Infinity War.
Just Infinity War, because it is the first movie really ever, unless there's some other perspective, where there is 18 movies building up to one singular movie. The budget for this 2-part movie is $1 billion, and you get all of these highbrow people in one place at one time. And it's not like you're just getting like the B character actors. You are getting Oscar winners. You are getting people who have sacrificed probably other things that they could have done in their career to focus on these movies because they understand the impact that this is having. And we can look at it now and be like, well, yeah, they're still just comic book movies, but at the same time, they completely transcend because of the impact that they're having on the actual world. We can all unify saying that Marvel good.
Marvel good. And I think that's probably the biggest thing is like giving merit to these movies for something that, yes, they're huge blockbusters, but they do have a quality that's deeper than just they make a lot of money. They are financially successful. And you just got to take the time to talk about it, be part of that pop culture kind of thing, where it's like it's a great time to be a part of this, and it's also I'm happy to have been able to experience this at the most formative time of my life, because I don't like my parents, I don't know what the equivalent for them really is. There might be something there and I'm just completely missing it, but like what was their
could be like Star Wars, but that's also like it's a weird.
That's
point.
True.
But also that's like if you but in the course of 6 years you get everything, and that's the whole story. Obviously until 1999. Good work, George Lucas. You did it. But yeah, that's the thing. The reason I think this is historical is there is nothing you can necessarily compare it to because this is the first. And yeah, some of the plots of the movies are derivative. Some of the characters are a little bit flat. but it is just the fact that this exists in general is a complete anomaly, and like that's not an overstatement. Like, this is history, and yeah, it seems strange to say that.
Movie magic.
Yeah, the movie where the raccoon is spun around with the guy with the metal arm is history. You heard it here first.
and I just that's once again marvelous.
Yeah.
Because thank you. I'm just, like I said, that's we can just end it there. Honestly, I tip my hat to you.
I don't know if it's time to end, because I don't know. We've talked about the characters,
We have.
and if we think about the characters in the movie,
Oh, we're thinking about the characters.
it was one of the people who made a very big sacrifice in this movie, and what happened was Gamora,
Yes.
played by Zoe Saldana. And if you recall, in 2009, she was in another pretty big movie, Avatar, with Sam Worthington.
Yeah.
Sam Worthington was in a movie called Hacksaw Ridge from 2016,
Okay.
nominated for Best Picture, didn't win. Directed by Mel Gibson.
Oh,
Mel Gibson was in a movie in 2002. That
Braveheart.
movie? Braveheart was in 95.
Oh.
Everyone knows that.
Sorry.
This movie was Signs. Signed, sealed, delivered. It's Signs.
Thank God.
And I'm sure you could probably do it like 6 other times with all the characters.
I'll
in a
re-record
different
this
way.
as soon as I'm... All right. Well, on that note, we want to thank you for listening and
you.
have a marvelous night.